The older I get, the more I realize that Hollywood has culturally and creatively hit a cul-de-sac. We are stuck in the same era, perpetually at the mercy of the mores of Hollywood, circa 2016. There was a brief time around 2000 when the perfect storm occurred. I am, of course, referencing the Lord of the Rings movies made by Peter Jackson, a set of nearly perfect films, where nearly all of the promises of the medium of modern filmmaking were realized. Into this same era came many of the cultural phenomenon that surround us to this day. The early 2000s were not without their flaws, but it was the era that gave us the aforementioned Jackson trilogy, as well as the movie that put spandex into the mainstream of cultural awareness with Iron Man in 2007, which was the film that really launched the MCU. We also get the end of the Star Wars franchise with the last prequel film released in this same period. There were other franchises, films, television, and video games that received their genesis during this era, the result of the right people being in the right place at the right time with the right vision, and the proper amount of resources. And the result of this was a glut of creative endeavors that are still having knock-on effects to us to this day. And yet, I cannot help but feel that what we are currently seeing is not natural. Allow me to explain. Most cultural trends slowly burn to a peak and then fade like a fire made with wet wood. It smolders its way up to being properly hot and then burns very hot before it cooks off all its fuel and dies out rather quickly. But the cultural trends of the aughts have clung to life like a science project growing on the roast chicken at the back of my fridge. And this is not healthy. Hollywood has grown to believe that brands are eternal, and they are not. How many of you have read A Princess of Mars, or a Conan pulp, or listened to a Shadow Radio episode? How many of you have read Huckleberry Finn, or a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court? Or how many of you have read a Sherlock Holmes novel? Sure, you, dear viewer, might have experienced all of those things, but a lot of people have not. And I don't even need to go back that far in many cases. How many people still watch silent films? Buster Keaton went from being a household name to being an obscure conversation starter for the extremely autistic. And or people whose dad loves silent comedies. Don't ask, it was a different time. Hollywood has kept these franchises on the shelf well past their expiration date because they do not want to have to make anything new. Think of it like buying canned goods, getting in there with your Swiss Army knife only to find that it is empty, and when you take it back to complain to the people at the checkout, they call you a bigot for having the temerity to call them on selling you an empty can. The people running Hollywood have been flash frozen in the era in which the message .tm was in ascent, where the audience hadn't yet caught on to the whole skin suit routine yet, and now that the audience has, Hollywood refuses to change, as they are more than willing to sacrifice monetary profits for long-term cultural victory. And that has worked out about as well as your average poly relationship, and so Hollywood and the media industrial complex as a whole clings to the idea that they can still win, despite the fact that the message TM has now become about as popular as a straight white guy in a Hollywood writer's room. In other words, terminated. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I've got for today. Tell me what you think down below. This has been Pete, the Radical Nerd, signing off.